The stars were quiet that night. Admiral Park stood alone on the observation deck of United Earth Defense Station 7, watching the cold light of distant suns. Behind her, Neptune spun slowly in the darkness, its blue surface hiding storms larger than entire planets. She had served humanity for 30 years, and in all that time, the universe had taught her one simple truth: space did not care about the lives within it. She was 52 years old now. Her black hair had turned gray at the edges, and her eyes carried the weight of too many battles. But her back remained straight, and her voice still commanded respect from every soldier under her authority. The crew called her Iron behind her back, and she pretended not to know. The door behind her opened with a soft sound. Lieutenant walked in quickly, his young face tight with worry. He was only 26, fresh from the academy, and he still got nervous around his admiral. But tonight, something else filled his eyes, something that looked like fear. "Admiral," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "we received something strange, a signal from deep space, very deep." Turned to face him. "What kind of signal?" "A distress call, ma'am, but it is not from any species we know. The language is completely new. Our computers are still trying to translate it." She followed him to the communications center, where a dozen officers worked at their stations. The main screen showed a wave pattern, the visual form of the alien signal. It pulsed with desperate energy, repeating the same message again and again. "How far?" asked. 3 months at maximum speed," answered. "The signal is old. It has been traveling through space for almost 2 years before reaching us." 2 years. Whatever was happening out there, it had started long before humanity even knew about it. Felt a cold feeling in her chest. She had heard distress calls before. She knew what desperation sounded like in any language. The translation computer made a sound. The screen changed, showing words that made every person in the room stop breathing. "To any who hear this, the devouring swarm has found us. They consume everything. Our world burns, our children scream. We beg. Anyone, help us die with dignity, for salvation is impossible." Silence filled the room, looked at his admiral with wide eyes. "The devouring swarm," he whispered. "I have read about them in the galactic records. They have destroyed over 200 civilizations. No one has ever stopped them. No one has ever even tried." Read the message again. Her mind focused on 4 words: "Our children scream." She closed her eyes and saw her own past. 20 years ago, the Martian colony had collapsed when its life support systems failed. 300,000 people died in a single night. Among them were her husband and her 7-year-old daughter. She remembered getting the news. She remembered falling to her knees. She remembered screaming into the empty darkness of her quarters while the universe continued to spin, cold and uncaring. She had joined the military after that. She had promised herself that she would never stand by while others suffered. She had broken that promise many times, following orders, respecting boundaries, accepting the wisdom of the Galactic Council. But tonight, looking at that desperate message, she felt something old and angry wake up inside her heart. "Get me a secure line to Earth Command," she said quietly. Hesitated. "Admiral, the Galactic Council has rules about this. They say we should not interfere in natural extinction events. If we respond to this signal, we will be breaking galactic law." Turned to look at him. Her eyes were hard as stone. "Lieutenant, I just read a message from people watching their children die. Do you think I care about galactic law right now?" He swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, ma'am, secure line coming up." The face of Fleet General Han appeared on the screen moments later. He was an old man now, almost 70, but his mind remained sharp as a blade. He and had served together for decades. They had saved each other's lives more times than they could count. He looked at her face and immediately knew something serious was happening. He said carefully, "You look like you are about to do something stupid." "Probably," she admitted. She sent him the translated message. He read it slowly. His expression did not change, but she saw his hands tighten into fists. He had now 4 of them. She knew he was imagining them in the place of those screaming children. "The Galactic Council will be very angry," he said finally. "Let them be angry. This is a suicide mission. The devouring swarm has never lost. They have been destroying civilizations for 50,000 years. Then it is time someone taught them what losing feels like." Was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly, a small smile appeared on his old face. "You know, I always said you were the craziest officer I ever met." "Is that a yes?" "That is a yes." He leaned back in his chair. "I will personally authorize the mission. Start preparing. I will send you everything we have." After the call ended, approached carefully. "Admiral, what exactly are we preparing for?" She looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, an entire species was dying. They had sent a message into the void, expecting nothing. They had asked only for the dignity of a witnessed death. But they had made one mistake. They had sent that message in the direction of Earth. They had asked for help from the species that the galaxy called, humans who had evolved on a planet so dangerous that most aliens considered it a living nightmare. Humans who had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and the death of their own world's climate. Humans who were too stubborn, too angry, and too compassionate to let a cry for help go unanswered. "We are preparing to show the galaxy what happens when someone asks humanity for help," said quietly. "Get me the fleet commanders, all of them. We have work to do." That night, as the orders went out across human space, the universe remained cold and quiet. It did not know that something was coming, something that had never been seen before in 50,000 years of galactic history. For the first time ever, someone was going to fight back against the devouring swarm. And that someone was very, very angry. The shipyards of Mars had never been so busy. Day and night, workers moved through the massive construction areas, preparing humanity's greatest warships for battle. The red planet's sky was filled with vessels of every size, from small attack ships to massive carriers that could hold thousands of soldiers. Fleet General Han stood on the observation platform of the main shipyard, watching his fleet come together. Behind him, holographic screens showed reports from every corner of human space. Ships were gathering. Soldiers were volunteering. The word had spread quickly. Humanity was going to war against something that had never been defeated. And everyone wanted to be part of it. Commander Lee walked up beside him, her tablet in hand. She was 40 years old, with short black hair and sharp eyes that never missed a detail. She had spent 15 years studying alien threats, preparing for battles that most people thought would never come. Now, finally, her knowledge would be tested. 47 ships confirmed, she reported. Including the flagship, we have enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Shook his head slowly. Will it be enough? I do not know, sir. The devouring swarm has billions of organisms. They have never fought a real battle because no one has ever challenged them. They simply overwhelm everything with numbers. She paused. But that might be their weakness. They have never needed to develop real tactics. They have never faced an enemy that fights back. Then we will give them that experience. The flagship of Fleet Doom floated in the center of the shipyard, surrounded by smaller vessels like a giant among children. It was called the Extinction Event, and it was the largest warship humanity had ever built. Nearly 3 kilometers long, it carried weapons that could crack planets open and shields that could survive the heart of a star. When it passed through alien space, other species would hide in their homes and pray it kept moving. Deep inside the Extinction Event, Chief Engineer worked without rest. His workshop was a mess of wires, tools, and half-finished weapons. He had not slept in 3 days, and his hands shook slightly from too much coffee, but his mind remained focused on one goal, building something that could hurt the swarm. The problem, he explained to his young assistant ensign, is that the swarm is biological. They are living creatures. Normal weapons work against them, but they adapt quickly. If we shoot them with lasers, they develop heat-resistant skin. If we use missiles, they grow armor. We need something they cannot adapt to. Watched him work, her eyes wide with curiosity and fear. She was only 23, barely out of training. This was supposed to be a quiet first assignment. Instead, she was helping to build weapons of mass destruction. "What are you making?" she asked. Held up a small metal cylinder. It looked simple, almost harmless. "I call it hellfire. When this explodes, it creates temperatures hotter than most stars. Everything within 10 kilometers turns to ash instantly. The swarm cannot adapt to being completely burned away." "That sounds terrifying." "It is." He set the weapon down carefully. "But we are fighting something that has killed trillions of living beings across 50,000 years. Being terrifying is the only way we survive." Was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question that had been bothering her since the mission was announced. "Sir, do you think we are doing the right thing? The Galactic Council says we should not interfere. They say the swarm is like a natural disaster, something that cannot be stopped, only avoided." Stopped working and looked at her. His face was tired but determined. "The Galactic Council has watched 200 species die. They did nothing to help, they called it wisdom." He shook his head. "I call it cowardice. Someone is dying out there, Ensign. They asked for help. We can give them help. That makes the choice very simple." On Earth, Ambassador faced a very different kind of battle. The Galactic Council had called an emergency meeting, and representatives from dozens of alien species were shouting at him through holographic displays. "This is madness," screamed the representative from the Federation. "You are provoking a force that could destroy your entire species." "The devouring swarm has never attacked humanity," added the delegate, her voice cold with anger. "By interfering, you put yourselves in danger. You put all of us in danger." Listened patiently until they finished. Then he stood up slowly and looked at each alien face on the screens around him. "I have read the galactic records," he said calmly. "Every time the swarm appears, the Council does the same thing. You evacuate what you can. You sacrifice the rest. You hide until the swarm moves on." He paused. "How many children have died while you were hiding? How many families were eaten alive while you told yourselves there was nothing you could do?" The representatives fell silent. "Humanity received a distress call. Someone asked for our help. We are going to give it. That is our answer. That is our nature." He straightened his jacket. "You can condemn us. You can sanction us. You can call us stupid, reckless, or insane. But you cannot stop us. We do not abandon people who cry out for help." He ended the transmission before they could respond. 3 weeks later, Fleet Doom was ready. 47 warships, 20,000 soldiers, and enough weapons to fight a war that everyone said could not be won. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the extinction event, looking at the stars that waited beyond. Behind her, every ship reported ready. Every crew member understood the risks. Many of them had written letters to their families, letters that might be the last words they ever sent home. But no one wanted to leave. No one asked to stay behind. "All ships," said into the fleet-wide communicator, "this is Admiral Park. We are about to travel farther than any human has gone before. We are about to fight an enemy that has never been defeated. Many of us will not come home." She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. "But somewhere out there people are dying, children are screaming, and they asked if anyone would help them." Her voice hardened with determination. "Today we answer. Today we show the galaxy what do when someone calls for help. Fleet Doom, move out." The engines of 47 ships roared to life. One by one, they jumped into faster-than-light travel, disappearing into the darkness of deep space. The universe had never seen anything like it. Neither had the devouring swarm. 3 months of travel through empty space had given everyone too much time to think. The crew of the extinction event had studied every piece of information about the devouring swarm. They had watched recordings from dead worlds. They had read the final messages of dying species, and with each passing day, the fear had grown heavier. But when Fleet Doom finally arrived at the system, they discovered that reality was worse than anything they had imagined. Admiral Park stood frozen on the bridge, staring at the. Around her, officers gasped and whispered prayers in languages from every corner of Earth. Even the veterans, the soldiers who had seen death many times, could not hide their horror. The system had once held 4 planets. 3 of them were now dead, not just lifeless, completely dead. The swarm had eaten everything. Oceans, forests, mountains, cities, all gone. Nothing remained except bare rock floating in the darkness. It was as if some giant creature had licked the planets clean. But the 4th planet, Prime, still had life, and around it the devouring swarm circled like a storm of nightmares. "Sensors are having trouble counting them," reported, his voice barely a whisper. "There are billions, maybe more. The entire planet is surrounded." The swarm ships were not like human vessels. They were alive, giant organic creatures that moved through space like monsters from ancient stories. Some were as large as mountains. Others were small and fast, swarming in groups of thousands. Together, they formed a living wall between the fleet and the planet below. Commander Lee studied the tactical display with professional calm, but her hands were shaking. "They have not noticed us yet," she said. "They are too focused on the planet. They are still feeding." That word, feeding, made everyone's stomach turn. "Find the survivors," ordered. They sent the distress call. Someone must still be alive down there. After long minutes of searching, they found a weak signal coming from deep underground. They had built bunkers beneath their cities, hiding from the horror above. 2 million survivors huddled in the darkness, waiting for death. The face that appeared on the communication screen was not human. They were tall, thin creatures with features that reminded of birds. They had large, gentle eyes and delicate hands built for art and science, not war. The being on the screen was old, a female named Keeper, who seemed to be their leader. When saw the human ships on her screen, she did not believe it. Her large eyes filled with tears that floated in the low gravity of her bunker. "You came," she said, her voice breaking. "We sent that message into the void expecting nothing. Why would anyone come?" Leaned forward. "We received your call. We could not ignore it." "But you are, the galaxy fears you. They say you are dangerous, violent, unpredictable." Shook her head slowly. "Why would such beings travel so far to help strangers?" "Because you asked." Voice was simple and honest. "That is all the reason we needed." For a long moment could not speak. Then slowly she bowed her head. "The swarm has been eating our world for 2 years. Every day more of us die. We have tried fighting back, but our weapons are useless. Our ships were destroyed in the first week. Now we can only hide and wait." She looked up with eyes full of pain and exhaustion. "We have accepted death. All we ask now is for our children to die quickly without suffering." "No." The word was sharp and sudden, blinked in surprise. "No," repeated. "Your children are not going to die, not today, not while we are here." "But the swarm cannot be defeated. They are billions, you are." 47 ships and 20,000 humans, finished. "It is enough." Stared at her as if she had gone insane. Perhaps she had. But there was no other option. Had not traveled 3 months across the galaxy to watch another species die. Commander called a meeting of all the ship captains through holographic communication. 46 faces appeared on the bridge, each one showing a mixture of fear and determination. They had seen the enemy. They knew the odds, and they were still here. "The swarm has never fought a real battle," explained, pointing at tactical displays. "They overwhelm with numbers, they surround, they consume, but they have never faced someone who fights back with real strategy." She zoomed in on the planet. "The survivors are underground. The swarm is focused on breaking through their defenses. That means the enemy's attention is divided. "What is the plan?" asked Captain, commander of the destroyer Morning Calm. He was a large man with a deep voice and scars on his face from a dozen battles. "We hit them hard and fast, we break their formation, we make them afraid." Eyes were cold. "And then we keep hitting them until they are all dead." Captain laughed, a rough, humorless sound. "I like this plan, simple, violent, very human." Sergeant Ryu, leader of the Marine Ground Forces, spoke up from her ship. "My soldiers are ready for ground operations. We can support the bunkers, protect their evacuation routes, and kill any swarm organisms that get too close." "You understand what you are volunteering for?" asked. "The conditions down there are extreme. High gravity, toxic atmosphere, temperatures that would kill most species." Smiled a wild, dangerous smile. "Admiral, we grew up on a planet that tried to kill us every day. A little extra gravity and bad air is nothing." Private Moon, the youngest soldier in squad, listened to the conversation from the transport ship's cargo bay. He was only 19 years old, barely more than a child. His mother had cried when he volunteered for this mission. His father had hugged him silently, unable to find words. He looked at the other Marines around him, men and women who had trained for years, who had fought in smaller conflicts across human space. They were checking their weapons, adjusting their armor, and writing final messages to their families. Was scared. He was not ashamed to admit that. Only a fool would not be scared of what was waiting for them below. But he thought about the children, hiding in dark bunkers, listening to monsters break through the walls. He thought about what he would want if his family were in that situation. He would want someone to come, someone to fight, someone to give them hope. He checked his rifle one more time and stood up. If he was going to die, he would die giving someone hope. On the bridge of the extinction event, Admiral Park gave the order that would begin the greatest battle in galactic history. "All ships prepare for combat. We attack at dawn local time." She paused, looking at the nightmare that awaited them. "Let's teach the swarm what fear feels like." First day of battle began with fire. Admiral Park watched from the bridge of the extinction event as her fleet advanced toward the swarm in a formation that the Galactic Council would later call completely insane. The ships moved in a tight wedge, shields overlapping, weapons charged to maximum power. They were diving straight into the heart of the enemy. The swarm, at first, did not understand what was happening. For 50,000 years they had been the hunters. Prey ran away. Prey hid. Prey died. The concept of prey attacking them was so strange that the hive mind took several minutes to even recognize the threat. Those minutes cost them dearly. "All ships fire," commanded. The void of space lit up like a second sun. 47 human warships unleashed everything they had. Missiles, lasers, plasma cannons, and terrible hellfire warheads. All of it poured into the swarm's formation like a wave of pure destruction. The swarm screamed. It was not a sound that could be heard in space, but every telepathic species within 10 light-years felt it. For the first time in recorded history, the devouring swarm experienced pain on a massive scale. Their organic ships burned. Their drone organisms died by the millions. The living wall around Prime cracked and shattered. On the bridge shouted over the noise of battle. Direct hits on multiple swarm carriers. They are losing cohesion. "Keep firing," ordered. "Do not give them time to think." But the swarm was old. It had survived for 50,000 years because it could adapt to anything. Within hours, it began to change. The organic ships grew thicker armor. The drones developed new attack patterns. What had started as confusion became organized rage. The hive mind focused all of its attention on the human fleet, and for the first time it fought with real purpose. The destroyer Morning Calm was the first human ship to fall. Captain stood on his burning bridge, watching as thousands of swarm drones attached themselves to his hull. They were eating through the metal, crawling toward the reactor core. His weapons were destroyed. His shields were gone. Most of his crew was already dead. "Admiral," he spoke calmly into the communicator, "the morning calm is lost. I am taking her into the largest swarm carrier I can find. It has been an honor." He started, but he had already cut the connection. The morning calm turned toward a massive swarm, a carrier larger than a mountain, pushed his damaged engines to full power. The drones tried to stop him, but it was too late. The explosion when his reactor core detonated was visible from the planet's surface. 17 swarm vessels died with him. Thousands of drones vanished in the fire. On the bridge of the extinction event, closed her eyes for just a moment. Then she opened them and continued fighting. On the ground, Sergeant Ryu led her Marines through hell. The surface of Prime was a nightmare. The air was thick with toxic gas. The gravity was almost twice Earth normal, making every step a struggle. The temperature swung between freezing cold and burning heat, and everywhere the swarm's ground organisms hunted for prey. But the Marines were. They wore heavy armor designed for the worst environments in the galaxy. They carried weapons that could punch through tank armor, and they had something the swarm had never encountered before: humans who refused to stop fighting. "Hold the line," shouted as another wave of swarm creatures charged toward the bunker entrance. "They do not get past us." Her soldiers fired without stopping. The alien creatures fell in piles, but more kept coming, always more. The swarm had endless numbers. Private Moon stood at the far end of the defensive line. He was scared, more scared than he had ever been in his life. But every time he wanted to run, he thought about the children hiding behind him. He thought about their large, frightened eyes. He thought about what would happen to them if the line broke. So he stayed and he fired, and he kept firing. The battle raged for 3 days straight without stopping. By the end of the third day, the Marines had lost half their numbers, but they had held the line. The bunker entrances remained secure. The evacuation of children to human transport ships continued without pause. In space, the situation was equally desperate. Fleet Doom had lost 12 ships. The swarm had lost thousands of vessels, but they seemed to have an endless supply. For every carrier that burned, 2 more appeared from the depths of space. The hive mind was calling reinforcements from across the sector. Chief Engineer worked without sleep, keeping the extinction event's weapons operational through sheer willpower. His hands were burned from handling overheated equipment. His eyes were red from exhaustion. But every time someone told him to rest, he refused. "I will sleep when they are all dead," he said simply. On day 5, the tide began to turn. Commander Lee had been studying the swarm's patterns throughout the battle. She noticed something strange. Their reactions were getting slower. Their coordination was weakening. Something was wrong with the hive mind. "They are not used to this," she reported to Admiral Park. "They have never fought a battle that lasted more than a few hours. Their communication network is overloaded. They are making mistakes." Studied the tactical display. She saw what meant. The swarm's movements were becoming chaotic. Vessels were crashing into each other. Attack patterns were falling apart. "They are not just unused to fighting," realized slowly. "They are unused to losing." For 50,000 years, the swarm had been invincible. Every species they attacked had either fled or died. They had never experienced doubt. They had never felt fear. And now, facing an enemy that would not run and would not surrender, their ancient confidence was cracking. On day 7, Private Moon became a legend. His squad was defending a secondary bunker entrance when a massive swarm assault overwhelmed their position. One by one, his squad members fell. Within an hour was alone, a single human standing between 3,000 children and certain death. He should have run. No one would have blamed him. The odds were impossible. But thought about his mother's tears. He thought about his father's silent hug. He thought about what kind of person he wanted to be. He raised his rifle and started firing. For 6 hours, he held that entrance. He used every weapon he could find. He built barricades from the bodies of fallen swarm creatures. He fought until his ammunition was gone, then he fought with his combat knife. He fought until his armor was shattered and his blood was flowing from a dozen wounds. When the Marine reinforcements finally arrived, they found him still standing in the doorway, knife in hand, surrounded by hundreds of dead swarm organisms. Behind him, 3,000 children were alive and safe. Died with a smile on his face. The children would remember his name forever. By day 11, the swarms will finally broke. Their losses were catastrophic, tens of thousands of vessels destroyed, billions of organisms killed. The human fleet was battered and bleeding but still fighting. The hive mind could not understand it. How could such a small force cause so much damage? How could these creatures refuse to die? For the first time in 50,000 years, the devouring swarm began to retreat. But Admiral Park had no intention of letting them escape. "Find their brain," she ordered Commander. "Every hive has a center. Find it. We end this today." Commander Lee found the swarm's brain hiding in the asteroid belt at the edge of the system. It was a moon-sized organism, a living biological computer that connected every creature in the swarm. For 50,000 years, this ancient being had directed the consumption of 200 civilizations. It had never been threatened. It had never been found. It believed itself to be immortal and untouchable. It was wrong. "There it is," reported, pointing at the tactical display. "The Central Intelligence Node. Every swarm organism is connected to it. Without that thing they cannot coordinate, they cannot think, they cannot adapt." Admiral Park studied the image on the screen. The brain moon was protected by the densest concentration of swarm forces they had yet seen. Thousands of surrounded it like a living shield. Breaking through would cost lives. Many lives. She looked around the bridge at her exhausted crew. Had not slept in 3 days. His hands shook as he operated his console. Other officers showed similar signs of fatigue. They had been fighting for 11 days straight against an enemy that never stopped coming. "How many ships do we have left?" she asked quietly. 28 combat capable, answered. "The others are too damaged to fight." 28 ships against thousands of swarm defenders. The math was terrible, but had learned long ago that math did not always decide battles. Sometimes, determination mattered more than numbers. "All combat ships form up behind the extinction event," she ordered. "We are going to punch through their lines and destroy that brain. One final push. Everything we have left." The response from her captains was immediate and unified. No one questioned the order. No one asked about the odds. They simply acknowledged and prepared to fight. Chief Engineer limped onto the bridge. His left arm was bandaged, and his face was pale from blood loss. He had been wounded 2 days ago when an explosion tore through his engineering section, but he had refused to leave his post. "Admiral," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion, "I have modified the remaining Hellfire warheads, tripled their power. One direct hit on that brain moon and it will be finished." "Will the ship survive firing them?" Hesitated. "Probably. The weapons systems are damaged. There is a chance they will explode on launch instead of reaching the target." "How big a chance?" "About 30%. Nodded slowly. 30% chance of dying before they even reach the enemy. 70% chance of continuing to fight. Those were odds she could accept. "Load the warheads," she ordered. "We fire when we reach optimal range." The final charge of Fleet Doom began at sunset, local time. 28 human warships formed a wedge behind the massive extinction event. Their shields overlapped, creating a wall of protective energy. Their weapons charged to maximum power, and at the front, Admiral Park stood on her bridge, watching the storm of swarm defenders that waited for them. "All ships advance," she said calmly, "and may whatever gods you believe in be with us." The fleet dove into the swarm's defensive formation like a knife through flesh. The battle was chaos. Swarm crashed against human shields. Drones swarmed over every exposed surface. Weapons fire filled the void with light and death. Human ships began to fall, one, then two, then five more. Each explosion marked the death of hundreds of crew members who had volunteered to be here. But the fleet kept advancing. On the ground below, Sergeant Ryu watched the sky light up with distant explosions. Her surviving Marines gathered around her, their faces turned upward as they witnessed the final battle for their species' future. Keeper stood beside her, the old leader's eyes filled with tears. "They are dying for us," she whispered. "Why, we are strangers, we are nothing to them." Thought about how to answer. She thought about Earth, the beautiful, terrible planet that had created humanity. She thought about all the wars and disasters that humans had survived. She thought about the strange, stubborn compassion that lived in human hearts. "You are not nothing," she said finally. "You asked for help, that makes you family." Did not understand. Perhaps she never would, but she reached out and took his hand, and together they watched the sky burn. The extinction event broke through the final defensive line, with only 6 ships still following. The brain moon filled a massive, pulsing organism covered in organic sensors and communication tendrils. It saw the human ships approaching, and for the first time in its ancient existence, it felt something close to fear. "Hellfire warheads ready," reported the weapons officer. Admiral Park stood at the center of her bridge, surrounded by officers who had followed her into certain death without complaint. She thought about her husband and daughter, lost so many years ago on Mars. She thought about the children they had saved. She thought about Private Moon, who had died alone so that others could live. "Fire," she said quietly. The extinction event shuddered as the modified warheads launched. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. 30% chance of failure hanging over them like a sword. Then the warheads streaked toward their target, burning through the void faster than the eye could follow. The explosion that followed was like the birth of a star. The brain moon vanished in a flash of light so bright that sensors across the entire sector recorded it. Temperature readings exceeded anything in human measurement systems. The shockwave expanded outward, destroying hundreds of swarm instantly. And then came the silence. Across the entire system, the swarm stopped moving, drifted aimlessly. Drones fell from the sky. Ground organisms collapsed where they stood. Without their central intelligence, the devouring swarm was nothing, just organic matter waiting to decay. On the bridge of the extinction event, the crew stared at their screens in disbelief. Then, slowly, cheers began to rise. Officers hugged each other. Someone started crying. Someone else started laughing. Admiral Park sat down heavily in her command chair. Her hands were trembling. Her eyes were wet. Around her, the celebration continued, but she could only think about the price they had paid. 19 ships lost, 8,000 human lives, names and faces that would never return home. But they had done it, they had won. The communication system crackled. Keeper's face appeared on the screen, tears streaming freely down her alien features. "You saved us," she said, her voice breaking. You actually saved us. How can we ever repay this? How can we ever thank you?" Managed a tired smile. "You do not need to repay us. You do not need to thank us." "But why? You lost so many of your people. You sacrificed so much. For strangers, why?" Thought about the question. She thought about what it meant to be human, to have evolved on a world that constantly tried to kill them, to have survived through stubbornness and cooperation, and an absolute refusal to give up. She thought about the voice in her heart that had refused to ignore a cry for help, regardless of the cost. "Because someone asked," she said simply. "That is what we do. We hear a cry in the darkness and we answer it. We cannot help ourselves. It is who we are." The news of the Battle of Prime spread across the galaxy faster than light. The Galactic Council fell into shocked silence. For 50,000 years, they had believed the devouring swarm was unstoppable. They had built their entire strategy around running and hiding. And now, a young species from a single dangerous planet had done what no one else had ever attempted. They rebuilt their world with human help. They named their new capital city New Hope in the human language. They built monuments to every fallen human soldier, with Private Moon's statue standing tallest in the central square. Admiral Park retired to Earth, where she grew a small garden and wrote letters to the families of those she had lost. She never spoke publicly about the battle, but every year, on the anniversary of their victory, she received thousands of messages from citizens. They all said the same thing: "Thank you, we remember." And across the galaxy, the universe itself seemed to change. Other species began to look at humanity differently. They were no longer just dangerous survivors from an impossible planet. They were something far more important, something far more terrifying to those who preyed on the weak. They were protectors. And the galaxy learned a new truth. When you cried out for help in the darkness of space, someone would answer. Someone would always answer. Because that was what humans did.